All right, in this section 2 of Unit 3, we're learning about conditional statements. Okay, conditional statements put a condition on whether or not we want to do some piece of code. And they might even affect how many times we do that piece. But ultimately, you're going to have to make a decision, yes or no. And we say that conditional statements interrupt the sequential execution of statements. Okay, the standard behavior of Java would be to read all of your statements in order from top to bottom, first to last. Okay. The one exception to that we've seen so far, the one disruption, is with a method call. In a method call, you disrupt the order of the statements and you pause when you encounter the method call. You head off maybe to some other class, find the instruction for what to do. And then once you're finished with that task, you would then come back to where you'd left off and pick up again. Okay, a conditional statement is a little bit different. We're going to make a decision as to whether or not we want to do something. But ultimately, again, we're looking at affecting the flow. And so if statements can affect the flow, okay, and they can execute different statements. Right here, I have 6 print statements. Each one's printing out one word. However, I've put an if statement in front of one of those prints. And I've initialized this Boolean variable here called go to true. Let's actually set it to false, okay? And if that is false, then, and you put that inside of an if, the effect of that if is it's going to skip the next statement it encounters. So if this if statement sees a false Boolean condition, and it's a rule, it has to see a Boolean condition, it will actually skip the next statement it encounters. If this encounters a true Boolean value, then it will go ahead and execute that statement. And in my simple setting here, basically putting a true would do nothing. We could essentially erase the if. So if we run, okay, we notice here only 5 of the words printed, and you can tell I kind of handpicked the one that didn't print. So it says that I am your favorite teacher, and it omitted the word not. If we change the value of Boolean go to say true, okay, and we run our code, it's going to say that I am not your favorite teacher, because now when we encounter true, we're not being asked to skip any statements. I've written this as all one line of code, and there's exactly one semicolon at the end of that line of code. Most programmers would actually hit enter and tab, and that's the way I'll do it in the future too, but just to show you a different approach, okay? This is typically how it's done. Now, hitting enter, hitting tab doesn't actually change anything. When you compile your code, it gets translated into a machine language that throw away all the white space, the tabs, the spaces, the enters. So you could hit enter a few more times, you could hit tab a few more times. The bottom line is this if statement is going to link up to the next semicolon that it sees. If the if statement's true, no big deal. If the if statement encounters a false, well, then it is a big deal. What it's going to do at that point is it's going to step past the next semicolon that it sees. That's how it disrupts the flow. So as soon as that cursor gets past that semicolon, now we're going to pick back up in our sequential statements, okay? We're going to skip the one that we just skipped. We're going to go just past that first semicolon and then pick up from there. So we still are going to print the words your favorite teacher. We're just skipping this one until we get to that first semicolon and then stopping. All right, down here, if you want your if statement to control more than one thing, there's a way to do it. It requires a brace structure, okay? So here I have a shopping list, and right now my shopping list has 8 things on it. However, I've put 3 of those items, 3 of those print statements under the control of this single if by bracing them into their own block. And now my if statement is in control of that entire block. So if we change this Boolean condition to say false and we hit run, now bread, salami, and cheese will all be removed from the display. And so we only have milk, eggs, apples, and bananas, okay? So I think I said earlier there was 8. Sorry, there's only 7. I was counting shopping lists. So there's 7 items. We took out 3, all right? But that single if statement was able to control all 3 of those by putting those braces there. I didn't need braces here because I was only controlling one statement. If you want to control more than one statement, you have to brace it. And sometimes I see new programmers get a little confused. They think that if they put tabs, it'll give the control of the if to all of those print statements. That's not true. You'll notice that the word not doesn't print, but your and favorite still do. Those tabs are meaningless, okay? The tabs might affect my eyesight, but they don't affect how the computer is going to run. So whether or not you put tabs there doesn't matter. If you wanted to take control over all three of those statements, you'd have to put a set of braces around them. And then that one if statement would then have control of all of those statements. Okay, as long as you brace them into their own block. Now it just says I am teacher. All right. If I take off those braces, I go back, and again, then the tabs don't really matter. It would be bad practice to write code this way. We want to stick within the typical norms. So if you are going to, not put braces, you should put a tab on the affected statements to help readers of your code see what's happening, what's intended to happen, but it's not technically required. All right. Now, you might remember early in the year, there's a little soft rule. It's not a real hard set rule. It says never put a semicolon before an open brace. And if I were to put a semicolon here, I'd be violating that rule. I believe as a class, this is the first line of code I'm asking you to write that doesn't end in a semicolon. You've seen me make some method headers and other things to this point where I didn't put a semicolon at the end, but I don't think you've actually written one yourselves. So at the end of this if statement, you're not going to put a semicolon. What would happen if you did put a semicolon? Okay, well, it actually doesn't throw an exception. It would allow your code to run in this setting. But what it does is your code now thinks that the if statement is in control of that statement. What is that statement? That statement is nothing, right? I mean, the computer thinks there's a statement there because it sees a semicolon. And so it's given control of that statement to the if statement. But the statement was probably a mistake on my part, okay? Like there is no statement there. I think I just accidentally hit semicolon. Well, here's what's going to happen. Remember right now, need sandwich is false. We don't expect bread, salami, and cheese to print. They are going to print. The reason they're going to print is the if statement, when it took over the control of this semicolon, which was silly, it lost control of the block. It can't be in control of two things. So it's only in control of the very next thing that it sees. If the very next thing it sees is a block, it takes control of the whole block. But if the very next thing it sees is a semicolon, it takes control of the semicolon. So I don't think I intended to put that there, right? But it doesn't actually throw an error. It lets my code run. However, I'm probably not getting the results that I intended. So we don't want to put a semicolon at the end of an if statement because we're going to probably lose control of what we intended to be in control of.